Our next lesson is on the percent equation. So our percent proportion was our part over our whole is equal to our percent over 100. Now we have our percent equation, which is our part equals our percent in decimal form times our whole. So let me show you how we get this new equation. It actually comes from here. So if you remember, when we have a percent over 100, so let's say I have 80% over 100, if I were to simplify that and put it as a decimal, that would be 0.8. So when we write our percent as a decimal, we're really just simplifying this fraction right here. So when we do that, that leaves us with our part over our whole is equal to our percent in decimal form. Now if we want to get our part by itself, we have to get rid of our whole. When we have a fraction, that's the same thing as the division statement. So that's part divided by whole. So what's the opposite of division? That's multiplication. So instead of dividing by whole, I'm going to multiply both sides by my whole. So that'll cancel that out. So then I'm left with my part is equal to my percent in decimal form times my whole. So that's where the percent equation comes from, is it's a variation of the percent proportion. We're going to use it to find the same thing that we found in the previous lesson. We're going to find the percent, the part, and the whole. So take a moment to copy this down. What number is 12% of 150? Okay, so what number is 12% of 150? So we have our part is equal to our percent times our whole. Our keywords are exactly the same for this lesson. So remember, our keyword for our part, which is P, is. Our keyword for our whole, which is our W, is of. And our keyword for our percent, which is our N, is our percent. So I'm going to use these keywords to figure out my information. So my 12 has a percent sign. Whoops. So that has to be my percent. Okay. 150, that's of 150. So that's going to be my whole. So I'm trying to find out what my part is. So I'm going to plug it in. Part is equal to my percent. Remember, my percent needs to be in decimal form. So you divide it by 100, which is the same thing as moving your decimal 2 places to the left. So that is 0.12. Then I'm going to multiply it by 150. So I'm going to work this out. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 5 is 5. And 1 times 1 is 1. So let's bring down my 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 5 plus 3 is 8. And then my 1. And I have 2 decimal places. So my part is equal to 18. So for these problems, I need to see both your equation and your answer. So the problem is going to ask you to write an equation and solve it, and then round to the nearest tenth if necessary. Okay. So what it means by if necessary is if your problem goes past the 10th spot, you have to round. Okay, so let's look at A. What is 6% of 200? So I'm going to create my equation. So write an equation, then solve it. So what is 6%? So here's my percent of 200. Here's my whole. So I'm going to have P is equal to, I have to write my 6% as a decimal. So it'll be 0.06 times 200. I'm going to multiply 200 times 0.06. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 2 is 12. 0 times 0 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. And 0 times 2 is 0. And I have 2 decimal places. So that means P is equal to 12. So I've got my decimal right here. So I want you to go ahead and pause this and take a moment to do the exact same thing for B, C, and D, please. Okay, so let's label our numbers. So 72, that's our percent, that's my n, of 50 is my whole. So my equation for B is going to be P is equal to 0.72, so you have to move your decimal 2 places to the left. Your decimal needs to, or your percent needs to be in decimal form, times 50. So we're going to multiply 0.72, whoops, 0.72 times 50. 0 times 2 is 0, 0 times 7 is 0. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 7 is 35, plus 1 is 36. And I have 2 decimal places. So my P is equal to 36. Okay, C, my 14 is my N, and my 150 is my W. So my equation is P is equal to 0.14 times 150. Remember, your percent needs to be in decimal form, so you move your decimal 2 places to the left. So I'll multiply 150 times 0.14. 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 is 6. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 5 is 5, and 1 times 1 is 1. So we're going to add 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 6 plus 5 is 11, and 1 plus 1 is 2, and I have 2 decimal places. So my answer is going to be P is equal to 21. And then my last problem, find 50% of 70. So 50% is my N, and 70 is my whole. So this will be P is equal to 0.5, because I moved my decimal 2 places to the left. And when I move it 2 places to the left, I don't have to write this 0. So I can just put 0.5 times 70. So there's my equation. So I'm just going to multiply 70 times 0.5. 5 times 0 is 0. And 5 times 7 is 35. And I have 1 decimal place. So my P is equal to 35. Okay, copy this down. 21 is what percent of 40? So let's label what these are. I have an is here and an of here. So 21 is, so that's my part. Remember, we have our part is equal to our percent times our whole. Our keyword for our part is. Our keyword for our percent is percent. Our keyword for whole is of. So 21 is my part, so it'll be 21 is equal to, we don't know what our percent is, times 40. So we've got to get n by itself. So n times 40 is the same thing as 40n. Just like 8 times 5 is the same thing as 5 times 8. It doesn't matter what order you multiply in. So when you see it like this, n times 40, don't get confused. We still are doing the exact same thing. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I have to divide both sides by 40. So I'm going to have n is equal to, so I have to figure out what 21 divided by 40 is. 40 goes into 21 0 times. I'm going to add a decimal on the 0. 40 goes into 210 5 times. That's 200. So I have 10. I need to add another 0. 40 goes into 100 2 times. That's going to be 80. And 40 goes into 200 5 times. So I have n is 0.525. But what does n represent? N represents my percent. So I now have to change this back into a percent form. So by doing that, I move my decimal 2 places to the right. So n really equals 52.5%. So when they give us our percent, we need to change it into a decimal form. When we need to find out what our percent is, we have to change it from a decimal form back into a percent. So do the same thing with E and F. So So it says write an equation for each problem, then solve, and round to the nearest tenth if necessary. Okay, so what percent of 40 is 9? So here's is. Does it go with 40 or does it go with 9? There we go. So if it goes with 40, I have no keywords for 9. So that means the is has to go with 9. So here's my part. Of 40, so that's going to be my whole. So I have my part is equal to my percent times my whole. So that's going to be 9 is equal to n times 40. So I divide both sides by 40. So 9 divided by 40. When we divide, and when we set up our fractions like this, the number on top, your numerator, is what goes inside when we divide. 40 goes into 9 0 times. So I add a decimal and another 0. 40 goes into 90 2 times. It's going to be 80. So that's 100. 40 goes into 100 2 times. That's 80 again. And I add another 0. 40 goes into 200 5 times. Okay. So I have 0, n is equal to 0.225. So that's not my answer because I have to put it in percent form. So I can move my decimal 2 places to the right. So n really equals 22.5%. Okay, and F, 27 is, so that's my part, what percent of 150? There's my whole. So this will be 27 is equal to n times 150. So we'll divide both sides by 150. So I need to figure out what 27 divided by 150 is. 150 goes into 27 0 times, so I add another 0. It goes into 270 1 time. So 0 minus 0 is 0, 7 minus 5 is 2, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So I have to add another 0. 150 goes into 1200 8 times. 150 times 8 is 1200. So I have n is equal to 0.18. So I have to move my decimal 2 places to the right. So n is equal to 18%. There's my final answer. Copy this down. 13 is 26% of what number? So we have our percent. So this is going to be our n. So 13 is, so that's our part. So this will be 13 is equal to, remember what we have to do with our percent? We 0.26 times w. So now I need to divide both sides by the number in front of my letter. 0.26. Don't forget your decimal. 26 is not the same thing as 0.26. So 13 divided by 0.26. I have to move this decimal 2 places to the right, which means I've got to add a couple zeros. So 26 goes into 130. Sorry, my mind just went blank. 26 goes into 130 5 times. So let's do 26 times 5. 6 times 5 is 30. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 is 13. So that's 5. So I get 0. I bring down this other 0. 26 goes into 0 0 times. Don't forget to add this other 0. That's a mistake that I see quite often. So my whole is 50. Okay, so just remember, when we're dividing by a decimal, we've got to move that decimal over, and we have to add that many zeros to our number over here as well. So write an equation for each problem, then solve it, and round to the nearest tenth if necessary. So complete those 3 steps for these 2 problems, please. So 39 is our part, and 84 is our percent. So we have 39 is equal to 0.84 times W. So we divide both sides by 0.84. So 39 divided by 0.84, you're going to end up with W is equal to 46.4285, and it keeps going. So if you have a number that keeps going, we're going to stop at our hundredth spot, because we want to round to our nearest tenth. So we're going to look at our hundredths. So is the 2 going to make the 4 go up, or is it just going to drop off? In this case, it just drops off. So W is equal to 46.4. Okay, H. 26 is our percent, and 45 is 45. That's our part. So I have 45 is equal to 0.26 W. I'm going to divide both sides by 0.26. So I'll end up with W equals 45 divided by 0.26 gives us 173.076, and it keeps going. I'll stop there. So I want to round to my nearest tenth. So I'm going to look at my hundredth spot. Is the 7 going to make the 0 go up, or is it just going to drop off? In this case, it makes it go up. So it's going to be 173.1. Remember, if it's 5 or larger, it makes the previous number go up. If it's 4 or smaller, it just drops off. So we end up with 173.1. Okay, last example. The survey found that 25% of people aged 18 to 24 gave up their home phone and used only a cell phone. If 3,264 people use only their cell phone, how many people were surveyed? So go ahead and take a moment to copy this down. Okay, so let's read through. So we have survey found that 25%, so this has a percent, so that's going to be my percent, of people aged 18 to 24 gave up their home phone and used only a cell phone. If 3,264 people used only their cell phone, how many people were surveyed? So how many is the number, they want to know the total number of people surveyed. So that's going to be my whole, which means the people that responded and said they gave up their phone, that is going to be my part. So I have, my part is equal to my percent times my whole. So that'll be 3,264 is equal to 25%, so that's 0.25 times my whole. So I'm going to divide both sides by 0.25. Let's work this out. 3,264 divided by 0.25. Move my decimal 2 places to the right, so I have to do the same thing here. My decimal is now over here. 25 goes into 32 one time. So I have to carry my 1. 12 minus 5 is 7. I'm going to bring down my 6. 25 goes into 76 3 times. That's 75. 76 minus 75 is 1. I'm going to bring down this 4. 25 goes into 14 0 times. So I have to bring down a 0. 25 goes into 140 5 times. That's 125. So I have to carry my 1. 10 minus 5 is 5. That's now a 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. I'm going to bring down the 0. And 25 goes into 150 6 times. And I've zeroed out, so that's going to be my answer. So my whole is equal to 13,056 what? People.